Hello guys and welcome to a new video. Today I will be talking about a few basic techniques that you should know when you want to compete in Excel Esports. And yeah, I will do this based on the latest Road to Las Vegas case. Bit of music, but doesn't matter, it's like a general overview. So basically there are three different techniques that you should know when solving an Excel Esports case. One is the single cell approach, one is, I call it horizontal modeling, and one is using data tables. And I will show you all three in the course of this video. So, normally you know that we have like 10 to 20 games in each level, and we have currently 7 levels of difficulty. Normally the levels are increasing so that you start from level 1, which is super easy. For example, here it's simply two functions wrapped in each other, and you don't need there any of those approaches we will talk about in the following. You can simply type it in there, and then it gets like a little bit harder, some medium levels, and then later you have some harder levels, normally starting from 6 to 7, sometimes also at 5, but normally level 7 is the hardest. It could be also that you have like an independent level 7. We had a few cases there where like level 7 was separate from the following case. And sometimes the cases are quite built on each other. So for example, you get to know the data on level 1 and 2, and then you implement some medium techniques or implement the techniques on level 3, 4, 5, and then on level 6 or 7 you use those techniques in an advanced way, and yeah, so they are built on each other. So, and normally for the first levels you don't need to know any of those special techniques because those levels are relatively straightforward, but at least with the medium levels you get to know some of those techniques. And one of those techniques is the so-called single cell approach. It's my preferred approach, where you make the calculation in intermediate steps and then put everything together in a let statement, or from the start in a let statement, where you could name those intermediate calculations with letters or names, and then could calculate it. And you have the solution to a whole game in a single cell. Therefore, it's called a single cell approach. You have there the input data and then the intermediate steps, and at the end an output. And yeah, it could be super handy, especially since some of those levels are built on each other. So when you make something on the levels up front, then you could use parts or huge parts of the calculations you did before on later levels, and therefore you only need to copy then this down, and then okay, here the text split, we could for example use the text split stuff, and then work from there on here with this stuff here. So you save some time sometimes, and especially if the cases are built on each other a lot, it will save you time. Then there's the horizontal modeling, where you do basically the same, but instead of putting everything in a let function, you put it on the right side next to the input data. It's kind of easy, and especially with dynamic arrays, it is getting easier, because even if the input data later is like huge or not in the same length, you could also work with it. But one disadvantage you see here, I cannot simply track this down here because I will have spill errors, because this is not a one-dimensional model, it's a two-dimensional model. So not only in a line, I'm also spilling down, and therefore am not able to copy this simply down. Sometimes it's possible, But yeah, then you also could copy for later levels it down there to use their parts. But normally the horizontal approach is only used for some of the first levels. But currently with new techniques like the lemdify functions by DIM or OE Robot, you're also able to create an horizontal model and then put it into a lambda or a let function, which you can then use as a single cell approach. But normally horizontal I only use on the first levels and later turn this or start then with a let function and a single cell approach. Then there's another approach, it's called the data table approach. Data tables are not used that often in the practice, but here in Excel Esports they are used quite heavily. There are some guys that are using everything, or for example there's one guy, he has like one shortcut where he creates data tables from the start on 4 levels. I'm in favor of not doing that because I have a macro for this, which I can then create a data table template for a single level. So where I can say, okay, I want now start from level 4 with a data table. I click the certain or start a certain macro, and then I have a data table. But my data tables are adjustable. And that is a huge advantage because if you create data tables from the start on for the whole case, then you have the disadvantage that when you want later to use your calculations you did before, because the case is built on each other, you cannot simply adjust it. But I can simply say, okay, I'm not on level 4 anymore, I'm on level 5. And then something like here, the games are, the game numbers are adjusted, and also the lookup is kind of adjusted. But no, I'm on level 4. Okay, calculate. Yeah. And yeah, this is especially useful when you have a 2-dimensional model, which is a little bit harder to debug or something. So the single cell approach is not that easy. Then you have at a certain point, you have your game level. This is my game level or my game number. Then you have here a lookup for the input data. The input data could be also multiple cells, but you see here I'm simply looking up in the case for this message, which is then my input data. And then I build my model here. It's basically the same as the horizontal approach. And then I have a single cell output, and I create a data table, placing here the output, putting over, this is here adjusted, but it's a simple sequence function for the game number, putting this over, and then create a data table. I think you have it under data, what if analysis data table, column input cell in this yellow cell, and you could create or will create a data table here. The problem with data tables is that they tend to be a little bit slower. You see, it took some time to calculate. And yeah, they're not 100% as adjustable as other stuff. So if you then have here later, I copy then normally the data table for later levels, in this case level 5, and then adjust it from there on. But yeah, they have some tendencies to not be the best approach. But it's not only about being the best, it's about being the fastest, being the most adaptable approach. So you know, in Excel Esports it's not black and white. And also there's an advantage to this approach. So I'm also using data tables, but my normal, so to say normal approach is using like easy single cell approaches on the first levels, then normally turning a little bit of the calculations into horizontal mode, but still using a single cell easy mode approach. Then later turning something into lambda on the mid levels, and then for level 7 I normally also, because it's normally quite complicated, I normally also use a data table, at least on level 7 or 6 or something. So you also need to be a little bit flexible with your approach. And yeah, there's no right or wrong in Excel Esports. Some guys need to tend or need to rely huge on data tables. Some guys do not rely huge on data tables. But yeah, it's I'm in favor of the single cell approach, which slows me down sometimes. Other guys like the data tables, which has also advantages and disadvantages, but it's at least a cool technique because you can simply debug your calculation there. And yeah, the horizontal modeling is normally not every time usable, but yeah. Let's see what the outcome is. And yeah, I hope you do well in the next level. I think the next level is on in a few days, so I hope you could use the techniques there. Also, this was kind of a low-key video because we have some new local chapter guys where this technique could be handy. Yeah, single cell approach with the LED. I don't have a video about LED, I think, or I might have. I will put it in the comments. And also on data tables, what you need to know there is that you have, like, based on the game number, in this case 61, you have your lookup for this in the case sheet. So here I put up then this or multiple cells because you can also output with an XLOOKUP multiple cells. Then you use this input data. You have a single cell output. You create your data table based on the single cell output. So this up or like above the game result, then the game numbers on the left side, and then you put this data table stuff over there. And normally your game number is in when you have it on in a single column as a column input. And because you have done your lookup for the data of the case based on a certain cell where the game number is in, you then relate to the game number, click OK, and it's calculating automatically. But as I've said, it can slow you down. So if you like, please write in the comment what is your favorite technique in Excel Esports cases, or what you use most often, and if you're also quite flexible, or if you're like a hardcore single cell approacher or a hardcore data table user. Thank you for your attention. I hope to see you next time. Bye.